Hi, welcome back to another episode of ColdstreamRodshop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're going to continue working on the Camera Lady's 32 Ford Roadster. The goal or the plan is to put the steering column in. We've got a brand new steering column support, one for the floor. And then we also have a low car shifter that I need to put in. Kind of all of this stuff has to go in before I start making the floor and weld the floor up to the firewall. So already previously, I think if you've been watching, I've been kind of like messing around a little bit with the steering knuckles. Oops. So that's not good. So right now, we've already figured out that I'm going to have three steering U-joints. So what we think it's going to look kind of like that. I've got a big Heim joint that will go down here and support the longest. It's going to come out from the frame and probably right down where my finger is pointing. It'll support that. So I need a little room in order to spin the oil filter off. If I don't think I have it, worst case, what I'll do is I'll buy a remote oil filter unit and then mount the oil filter down here or somewhere out of the way. But right now, I think I've got enough room to mount that just like that. So that's the plan. Follow along, see if I can pull that off, and we'll get more work done in the Camera Lady's 32 Ford Roadster. So today we're working on fitting the steering column in. What I've done so far is over here, I have put the lower steering support mount in there, which gives me clearance for the brake pedal. So once I weld the brake pedal pad on here, I'm going to clear the steering column. One of the things I'm able to do is go back over with the 32 pickup and the 29 Model A and kind of measure where the steering column is in relations to the brake pedal, but we don't want interference between the brake pedal pad and the steering column. And like right now, we get about an inch clearance, which is about the same as what I've got on the other cars. The next step was to build a support. So what I did was I took a piece of 3/4 inch rectangular, or not square tubing, 3/4 inch square tubing, and I bent it to the shape of the bottom of the dash. So I took a longer bar than that and I took it over on the vise and I just kept bending it and tweaking it so that it would fit exactly along the bottom here, the inside of the dash. Now what I don't know yet is whether I'm going to have to weld it to this or be able to weld it into the car. I'm thinking what I'm going to wind up doing is basically welding everything in place, and that way, I've got the support, weld the dash in there, and then I've got that extra level of support in the cowl, so everything's all stiffened up. Quite happy with the way it is right now. Part of my vision originally was to put another, instead of putting the support right here, actually put it further in, going across here over to the other side, but you're not able to do that since I have this cowl vent. This arm actually has to swing out of the way, so the only way that I can put a support stiffener in the cowl is to actually put it on the dash itself, because there's not enough real estate. So going to carry on with that. We're going to figure that out over the next few minutes, and then hopefully we're going to get the upper steering mount in and carry on with the project. Here's what I came up with so far. Actually moved the bottom mount over about an inch to the right and then up another 1.25 inches or so. What that did, it positioned the steering column a little further this way, because what I found is when I sat into it, or pretended to sit into it, the steering column was actually too far this way and the bottom was on too much of an angle. So just basically trying to go in and out. And what I did, I had a piece of 1.5 inch ABS pipe, which I've cut and angled the bottom so that I can kind of approximate where the steering column is going to be without taking the brand new steering column in and out and scratching it. Up underneath here, what I've done, I've don't show if I can show it or not. Just have a little piece of angle iron that I've drilled 2 holes into for the upper mount, and I've got it held in place. So once I'm sure of where that's going to be, I'll weld that to the back of the reinforcing piece. So right now, kind of happy with what's going on. On the outside of the firewall, I made a little mark on the firewall where it will come through here, and then I've approximated where the knuckle would be. So kind of lining things up, it looks as though it should come through the firewall, give lots of clearance for that steering knuckle for the exhaust, and then also for the oil filter. So next up, we're going to take the plasma cutter and cut a hole and see if I'm right. Where I left off was cutting a hole in the firewall with the plasma cutter. So that's done. I trimmed up the hole. I put the steering column in, and we've attached and welded. I welded that piece of the angle iron up underneath the dash here onto the reinforcing piece that's on the dash. So everything's mounted in place nice and solid. Steering column is best fit, the best we can. It's up out of the way. So down there, when I put the steering pedal pad on it, it clears the steering column, which is what we want. Nice, got a little bit of leg room between the brake pedal and like my left foot, so there'll be room there. So that's all good. And then on the front, I finished putting the U-joints in here. Now, the one thing I said I had to do was basically put like a Heim joint here that steadies it, because whenever you have 3 universal joints, you've got to have like a support on one of the shafts, preferably on the longest shaft. So that's what we did. So that Heim joint, it's really hard to show. I don't know if I can get it on the camera here, but it's just underneath here. This is the bolt that's tightened it up. I'll try and insert some pictures or take some pictures of it, but essentially, you know, that Heim joint supports this rod down here. So it's come up. I've already tried it. I can spin that oil filter off and drop it, no problem. So we've got clearance there. It's a little bit of a zigzag, but that's what the U-joints are for. One other thing I probably mentioned in other videos. So when I cut these steering shafts, once I'm sure of the length, I'll drill like a little 5/16 hole there in the shaft, so that when I put the set screws into it, they'll physically and mechanically lock in there. In addition, when I do the final assembly, I'll Loctite these and put the second one in. So you've actually got 2 set screws holding everything in place, plus mechanical lock, so there's no risk of it kind of falling apart. So that's it for kind of putting the steering column in and the U-joints and whatnot. Next up, we're going to work on putting the low car shifter in. Reason for doing that is putting the low car shifter in. I'll have that there, and then we'll start laying out the floor pans after that. Here's the 331 Cadillac motor that just arrived for the International Roadster. I was hoping to film us taking it off the back of a long trailer, but unfortunately it was just myself, and we had to do the shuffle across the plywood because the trailer was over 40 feet long, so it had to park up there on the road, and then we had to do plywood to plywood to plywood to get her here into the garage. So would have been fun to watch that, maybe hilarious, but made it in here safe, though nobody got hurt, and it's here safe and sound. There's the low car shifter put in place. It's pretty straightforward to put in. Basically follow the instructions, put the bolts in. Probably took about 30 minutes, I guess, to put it in here, so not going to go too much through the details, but a couple things in my case, what we're going to have to do. There's a lever right here that goes down right there where my finger is. When I got this transmission, the guy must have taken the original shaft out, and according to the instructions, you have to take the oil pan off, or the transmission pan, that is, off to put this in. So we're going to get this transmission rebuilt. So I'm going to leave this to the transmission guy to put in. It's relatively simple and straightforward. Once that lever's in place to hook up the rod from the shifter to the top of this, done it a few times before. It is actually pretty straightforward, so we're not going to do that right now. The primary reason for putting the shifter in was basically to have it there so that when I make the sheet metal floors, I can work or cut the holes for the shifter. The other thing I did on the other side, we're going to use a transmission mounted emergency brake lever instead of the one on the floor. So fortunately, from a couple projects, I had an extra bracket for where the emergency brake shifter goes. So I've ordered the shifter handle from Speedway. Probably won't see it for 3 or 4 weeks, but with this in place right now, I can approximate the hole for making the sheet metal tunnel. So we're in good shape on both of those right now. So I'm going to carry on with, I think next I'm going to weld the little nut on the brake pedal, and then we'll do a little lesson or so on how I made that flange to go against the firewall. So like I said, I would do a quick explanation, a little bit of show and tell on how I made the firewall flange. There's a couple different ways of making a tunnel. You can make a flange like this and then put your tunnel up against it, or you can make the flange as part of your tunnel. I've done both ways. This time I decided I would actually weld the flange onto the firewall, and then I was going to put my tunnel up against it. So the way to make it is, obviously it's bent. There's going to be some shrinking and stretching, but the first thing I needed to figure out is basically what angle I wanted this to be off of the firewall. So I'm not sure what angle it is, but I just took the protractor up, or whatever you call this thing, set the angle, and then I just bent a piece of metal at that same angle. So that's how this one started. So the first step that I did, I'm going to stretch the top here to form the curve. So over here on the stretcher, oh, camera lady just hit the welder, sorry. Sorry, need to stretch it, the top part. So just work along. You're probably gonna have to do it in a couple steps. It's better to do a little bit at a time and go back and do it a second time than to really make a mess of it, kind of thing. If you stretch it too much, you can always shrink it. So, but if you notice, as I'm stretching this flange, it's bending down. So it's bending down. So I've stretched this part of the flange to create the round part. What I'm going to have to do after I finish stretching this, I'm going to have to shrink this, which will then twist it back up again. I don't know. I think you get the idea. I want to get enough of an arc here so you'll see. So right now, if I start shrinking this, I'll be able to flatten this flange out. I know it's a little bit boring here, or repetitive. What I'm going to do is I should be able to lay this on the table. So some of it's come out, but I'm going to have to go back and forth quite a few times in order to get the, this is the part I have to stretch. So like I said, it's several iterations. You're going to have to go back and forth between shrinking and stretching. And you may actually have to come back here on the table and tap this out to maintain the angle that you want. So right now I've crept up on that a little bit, so I am going to have to knock that back over. So I think you get the gist of it. I can't just do it in 2 minutes. It'll probably take about an hour of going back and forth between shrinking and stretching. And then you want to get the right shape. So what I had done, I'd made a little cardboard template, and I made a line here on my table so that I could go back and forth here without actually having to climb inside the car. And then once I had enough shrinking and stretching between the two flanges, basically you want this outer flange stretched until you get the right shape this way, and then start working on the inner flange here to try and bring it in and bring it up. And like I said, don't be afraid to stick it in a vise here and whack it with a hammer to get everything straight again. So that's how I made that. Basically wrapping up this week's video with the Camber Ladies 32 Roadster. You know, we got the steering column in, we got the shifter in place, got the brake pedal tweaked up, I've got the pad on it there. This one threw me for a loop because there was a metric thread on there, so it must have been Chinese made or something, but nevertheless fixed it up, it's in place. At the end of this video, we're going to insert an interview with the gentleman who bought the 32 sedan, so stick along to the very end and stuff, and see how that went. A nice fellow that bought the car, and it's going to go to a good home, and it's going to get built. So there'll be more to come in the future. We'll give you some updates on that 32 sedan as we find out what's going on. But that's it for this week. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Everybody take care. So here's moving out day. The 32 sedan is going to a new owner. This is Greg. Greg's been a hot rodder longer than I have. I mean, I was dreaming about it when he was driving them. Greg used to have a 32 sedan, what, in the 1980s?
I built it in the 80s.
So full fendered.
Yep, full fendered car with a V6 Chevy and an 8-inch Ford and super bell axle and all the regular
stuff.
Hot rod stuff, and the original bumpers and cowl lights and
But you drove that down to the street rod Nats?
I did in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1987.
So you've been at this
for a while.
I've been dreaming about it as long as you've been at it, I guess is the point.
Right? We brought home the long distance award that year, and I still have it hanging on the wall in the shop, and for whatever reason couldn't hang on to the car, and been dreaming of building another one ever since. So this is going to be it. This is going to be it. I've been working on a 39 Chrysler for quite a while, and got a lot of metal work done, and the powertrain is done, and suspension, and Mustang too, and all that stuff. But I suspect it might be for sale or shoved in the corner if nothing else, and get cracking on this one.
So the vision for this one is going to be a full fendered 32 sedan.
Full fendered car with a full stock style hood, bumpers, big headlights on a dropped headlight bar.
So suspension wise, you're going to go with maybe straight axle, or
no, not independent. It'll be a hairpin front end with a 4-inch or 5-inch dropped axle, 9-inch rear. I haven't decided on Ford power or Chevy power. I have,
but basically kind of the 80s street rodish kind of
like a resto rod kind of thing. It'll have all the the right grill and headlights and bumpers and some kind of a sedate paint job. Nothing, no flames or nothing exotic. Just
kind of like what you
conservative and old style. Maybe even steel wheels and trim rings and hubcaps.
That's the end thing now. Like they're almost as expensive as what we used to pay for aluminum rings.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. But. So that's the plan. That's the
vision.
That's the vision. And so anyway, I've been trying to find some parts and finding a few here and there. And I have a new frame on order that I pick up at the Fall Carlisle in Pennsylvania in early October, and we'll get cracking.
All right, right on. So let's get her on the
Yeah.
back of the trailer. I won't keep you. Thanks for the interview.
Oh, no problem. Happy to
I
be
think
here.
people are going to want to see, if we can,
Oh.
your progression, whether we do a quick video but people want to see what happens to
Well,
them
I hope
kind of
I'm
thing.
smart enough to fix it,
I
but
think so.
I'm sure I can, but we'll see.
All right, let's get her on then.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. We've got to Greg's place, and Greg's gonna build a street rod from her. On to the next stage of his life.